we are not as good as we like to believe. Within each of us lives an instinctive drive for power, a cruel, aggressive side, a side capable of causing real harm to others. Yet instead of acknowledging these qualities, we tend to deny our flaws and weaknesses. But denial doesn't remove them. What we refuse to accept does not disappear. It sinks into the unconscious and accumulates in what Carl Jung called the shadow. In this video, we explore how confronting the shadow and integrating its elements into the personality can become a powerful means of improving life and a way of healing the inner split of the human psyche. For a shadow to exist, something must block the light. In psychological terms, that object is the persona. The word comes from Latin, referring to the mask worn by actors. In Jungian psychology, the persona represents the social mask we wear, the collection of traits we present to the world as who we are. As Jung wrote, the persona is a kind of mask designed on one hand to make a certain impression on others, and on the other, to conceal a person's true nature. The formation of this mask begins early in life. We quickly learn which traits of our character are approved by family, peers, and society, and which are rejected. The good traits are integrated into the personality. The bad ones are hidden behind the mask. Over time, in order to avoid inner conflict, most people fully identify with their acceptable side and repress the unwanted traits, not only from others, but from themselves. This repression gives rise to the shadow. The shadow represents the inferior part of the personality. It is the sum of psychic elements denied expression because they are incompatible with the chosen conscious attitude. These elements form a relatively autonomous, split-off part of the psyche, existing in the unconscious, often with tendencies opposed to the conscious self. Importantly, repressed traits do not lie dormant somewhere in the depths of the mind. They act independently, outside conscious awareness. One of the main ways the shadow expresses itself is through projection. We begin to perceive in other people, or in groups, nations, races, or political movements, the weaknesses and vices that exist within ourselves. As Jung observed, we continue to attribute to others all those evil and inferior qualities we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves, and therefore feel compelled to criticize or attack them. In reality, only one thing has occurred. The lower soul has migrated from one person to another. The world remains full of scapegoats, just as it once was filled with witches and werewolves. Elements of the shadow find expression in everyday life, influencing our moods and behavior. The instincts, desires, and traits we repress continue to ferment in the unconscious, creating tension between the conscious personality and the autonomous shadow. During stress or conflict, when the conscious mind can no longer keep the unconscious sealed, the shadow breaks through, often with destructive consequences. There are people who insist that their shadow does not exist. They boast of having no inner conflicts, yet they fail to notice the strange hysteria in their moods, the petty sabotage they inflict on themselves and others, nervous disorders, unexplained pains, irritation without cause, and a host of psychosomatic symptoms. Rather than denying the shadow, it is far more useful to shine light upon it. Confrontation with the shadow begins with acknowledging its existence, and with recognizing that the image we present to the world and our conscious sense of self does not fully represent who we are. Once this is accepted, honest self-examination and self-criticism can reveal the traits we have long avoided. Good and bad inevitably coexist within us if we wish to live without self-deception. Still, we cannot see the entire shadow simply by looking inward. Some aspects are buried too deeply. To uncover them, several approaches can help. First, pay attention to traits in others that trigger especially strong emotional reactions. These often indicate similar traits within us. Another approach is to observe the shadow of people close to us, which is often easier than seeing our own. Much of what accumulates in the shadow is shaped by social and cultural influences and is therefore shared by many. Jung concluded that the most individual aspect of a person is their consciousness. The shadow, by contrast, is far less individualized. The reason is simple. People differ from one another primarily through their virtues, not through their negative qualities. One major benefit of deeply encountering the shadow is that it creates contrast. The positive aspects of our character become more distinct. As Jung wrote, when we confront the shadow, we suddenly perceive both sides. We recognize not only our moral shortcomings, but also our strengths. We can honestly say, I am not as bad as I could be. To show someone their shadow is also to reveal their light. Confrontation with the shadow reduces the destructive power of our weaknesses. Awareness of anger, selfishness, greed, aggression, and obsessive tendencies gives us the ability, at least partially, to regulate them. We may strive to overcome these traits, or at the very least, reduce the damage they cause. As Jung noted, certain dangerous unconscious forces can be rendered harmless or kept under control if they are made conscious. Moreover, the shadow contains a vast reservoir of energy, particularly in the form of instinctual drives for power and aggression. When these drives are recognized and sublimated, redirected toward higher goals, they can provide strength, encourage necessary risk-taking, and even fuel creativity. It is crucial to understand that the shadow is not composed solely of primitive instincts and moral flaws. It often houses our strengths as well, qualities suppressed due to poor upbringing or adaptation to a dysfunctional society. Some people deny their intelligence, creativity, decisiveness, or capacity to act against authority. The shadow includes not only morally questionable tendencies, but also healthy instincts, realism, insight, and creative impulses. On one side, the shadow represents vulnerability and imperfection. On the other, it forms the foundation for higher consciousness. But to access its positive potential, mere observation is not enough. We must consciously integrate elements of the shadow into our character and allow them to participate in everyday life. Accepting the shadow means more than briefly acknowledging the dark brother and returning him to a psychological prison. It means restoring connection, granting the shadow freedom to participate in the life of the individual. Minimizing its destructive tendencies while integrating its energy into the conscious self creates a character oriented toward wholeness, a state Jung regarded as the hallmark of psychological health. As we approach wholeness, we become more appealing to others. People instinctively distrust those who appear too perfect. We sense that beneath an overly bright persona lies a hidden and dangerous shadow. What feels far more authentic is a whole person, someone who recognizes not only their strengths and potential for good, but also their weaknesses, flaws, and potential for evil. The shadow belongs to the whole personality. A strong person must be weak somewhere. An intelligent person must be foolish somewhere. Otherwise, they become too good to be true and descend into posturing and self-deception. When we encounter our shadow, we withdraw our projections. We stop constantly pouring our rage onto political opponents or people of other races, religions, cultures, or genders. Too many individuals see the root of all problems in society and in others, while ignoring the far more serious problems within themselves. They fail to recognize that they are divided within, and until they confront their shadow, this division will only deepen, intensifying hostility and inner fragmentation. Thank you for watching. I hope this gave you something to reflect on. Until next time.